Um, Kings 3:16 through 28. Um, Later, two women who were prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then on the third day, after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth. We were together. There was no one else with us in the house. Only the two of us were in the house. Then this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. She got up in the middle of the night, and she took my son from beside me while your servant slept. She laid him at her breast and laid her dead son at my breast. When I rose in the morning to nurse my son, I saw that he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, clearly it was not the son I had born." But the other woman said, "No, the living son is mine, and the dead son is yours." The first said, "No, the dead son is yours, and the living son is mine." So they argued before the king. Then the king said, "The one says, 'This is my son. This is alive, and your son is dead.' While the other says, 'Not so. Your son is dead, and my son is a living one.' So the king said, 'Bring me a sword.' And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, 'Divide this living boy in two. Then give half to one and half to the other.' But the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because compassion for her son burned within her, 'Please, my lord, give her the living boy. Certainly do not kill him.' The other said, 'It shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide it.' Then the king responded, 'Give the first woman the living boy. Do not kill him. She is his mother.' All Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to execute justice." And we have Psalm, 2:10. "Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Beware, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, so that you may be tested. And for the 10 days you will have affliction. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life."
Thank you. And if you join with me in the responsive reading. "You have dealt well with your servants, O Lord, according to your word. Teach me. Before I was humble, I was astray, but now I keep your word. You are good and do good. Teach me your statutes. It is good for me that I was humbled, so that I might earn your statutes. Thank you. All right, so today's message is what to do. I picked those verses. They're kind of not ones that we hear quite often, but I picked them for a reason, of course, because you do what he tells you to do. And when I was looking through stuff, the way I pick a verse is more of a feeling than anything else. And those are the two that really, really spoke to me. And today I'm going to be a little bit honest with you guys and tell you some stuff that it's not like private information, but I'm just going to tell you some stuff that's going on in our lives. So I'm going to start there. So as you guys know, Brian is in college, and we are trying to figure out ways how to help him, because you know how it is. When do you let your kids start making decisions of their own? When do they start answering those questions? Well, what do I do? How do I handle this? And I think it has to go, of course, it has to go kid by kid because no one person is the same. And for the most part, Brian has a pretty level head, for the most part. Everybody knows it can get a little big. But one of the ways that we feel that we can help him is that we are actually looking into buying a house for him. Now, this is not a house he's going to keep. This is a house he's going to live in for college. But our big what to do question is, how in the heck are we going to do this? I mean, because if you guys know, houses are not cheap and stuff. Well, Matt and I are the type of people that typically, when we're like, okay, let's do this, it's like now. And we'll figure out how to pay for it and the consequences afterwards. And we're actually sitting here, and this is one of the first times that we have not jumped the gun. We have looked online at houses. We have talked to Brian about it, which he's just like, yeah, go for it. But he also knows that he's still going to have to pay. But we're looking at something to try to give him more room, not only for him, but I mean, he'll have roommates and stuff. So, I mean, if you have not been to college, and I'm honestly one that has not been to college, but I know people that have been to college, and I've visited people that have been in college. If you know what a dorm room looks like, they are not very big. And Brian is actually living in a very small apartment-sized dorm with 5 other guys and stuff. And in all honesty, it's not a bad size, but when you get 6 people in there and you only have 1 bathroom, especially when it's boys, I know what it's like to have a bathroom with 3 boys. It's not very pretty. But what we have done, instead of jumping the gun and going to Lima, Ohio, and start looking at houses and saying, yeah, we're going to do this, here's your house. Now we need to figure out how to pay for it and what all the consequences are afterwards. We're actually taking, I would consider the baby steps and figuring out what we need to do. I mean, one of the things we have told Brian, we don't know if this is going to work out. The way I feel and the way I have prayed about it, I feel we are on the right track. I feel we are taking the steps that we need to take to help him out. But that means we don't know what to do. We've never done it this way. Like I said, we're more the people, it's like, okay, we want this, let's go do it. And stuff. So, like, one of the things we're doing, we are looking at our finances. We are looking at, what can we kind of get rid of? What are things that we can do to help purchase this house? We've actually talked to a financial counselor. And talking with them, they're actually like, you guys are really setting pretty good. But they're basically, they haven't come out and said it, but they've kind of said that it's probably not the best thing for you to do to buy a house because you may not be able to afford it. But then that comes back to having the faith that God is going to provide for us and take care of what we need, and not going into a whole lot of details. As you guys know, I went back to the preschool this year, and being the director and teacher, I took a pay cut from the job that I did have. Matt's work has changed. He's changed departments and everything else. his income has also changed. Not in the good way. Still very fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are not in a hole or anything like that. But our situations have changed. So what do? How do we handle that? And when I look at the scripture from 1 Kings, it sounds like the king knew exactly what to do and how to do it right then and there. But I don't think he really did. I'm sure he took a moment to kind of think about it. He listened to both sides to make his judgment. That's what we're doing. We're making our judgments by listening to both sides. We're trying to listen to what our advisor is telling us, but we are also listening to what God is telling us on how we should go, on how we should move forward. We're also listening to Brian. This is going to be his place. We want some of his input. Is he going to be living alone? No, he's already got, I think, 3 or 4 guys that are like, yeah, if we can get a house, that's awesome. Let's get a house. You know, more room, we can stretch out. And when you talk about addresses, it's one of the reasons I haven't given you Brian's yet, because we're not sure where he's going to be. We already know he's switching dorm rooms, so his address is already changing. That's going to come within the next couple of weeks. We are hoping to have everything figured out and figured out what we are going to do by the first of the year. So we'll see how that works out. But I know I don't know because I was not there. But for that king to make that judgment, he had to have some guidance. He had to have that feeling. He had to hear something to say, okay, this is what you need to do. And that only comes from one place. It comes from God. People hear God in all different ways. Some it's through music. Some it's through people talking. Sometimes it's just somebody in front of you smiling at you because you were having a bad day. Could be a kid walking up to you and giving you a hug. I have a couple of huggers in my preschool class. I have one little boy, he has to hug every adult that comes in to drop off their child. Which in some ways, a lot of people don't realize it. But that's a way that God shows his love. Now, for the other scripture I picked, Revolutions, which is a very, very hard book to read and to understand, because it can be like really out there in a lot of things. But for me, probably for Matt too, I think this is a real test for us right now. I think he is testing us to see if we will put faith in him to provide for us and for Brian, to see what we're going to do. Now, if the answer is no, then we are okay with that. We will be okay with that, because we know that this is not what God wants us to do. We will find another way to help Brian out, to figure out what we need to do to help him. And I'm not saying Brian's like really struggling or anything, but y'all know what it's like starting out. Even if you don't go to college, y'all know what it's like starting out. You don't have anything. You're broke. I remember we used to go to Matt's grandparents' house every Friday night when we first got married. Usually around 5, 6 o'clock. Because we knew that if we showed up about that time, they would feed us dinner. that was kind of an answer for us at that time. What do we need to do? How can we save money on food? But grandparents, if you show up, they're going to feed you. And honestly, that was one of the best decisions we've ever made for us, and I think for Matt's grandparents. A lot of you probably don't know this, but I would say in the last 4 years, it has really slowed down for multiple different reasons. Our Friday night dinners with his grandparents. But for at least 20 years, we showed up at his grandparents' house for dinner. They have literally seen our boys since they were born and have watched them grown up. And it kind of changed with things. Because we went from, they'll feed us, simple things, spaghetti, hamburgers or something, to what we call a pizza night. We started going out for pizzas. Or we would order it and bring it back to the house. They opened their doors, which they would have anyways because they're that type of people. Whoever showed up on Friday night got fed pizzas or got fed dinner. I think our largest night, we took up the whole party room at Pizza Hut in Monticello. We had almost 50 people show up. They never asked for a dime. They'd never asked for us to pay. Now coming to the end, I won't say the end because we still go there for dinner. Sometimes it's not on Friday nights anymore, but a lot of things have changed. Matt's grandpa has now passed away. Matt's grandma is doing okay in health, but she still has troubles. So we're, not just us, but the whole family is trying to decide, what do we do now? How do we go forward on this? But I would say the last 5 years that we were consistently going to Friday night pizzas, they were no longer paying. We were paying. Everybody that showed up chipped in, either by bringing their own pizzas to share or dividing the bill out. That's how you change. That's how you learn on what to do. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Especially when you're first starting out. When was the first big decision you guys had to make? How old were you? Do you guys remember? That's too far back. Well, I'm going to kind of tell on Brian a little bit. Because I think this kind of goes back to both of these verses on making decisions and going through trials. Because even Kevin and Jason, they're at the age where we're starting to let them make small decisions. But for Brian, since he's an adult, we're like, we can guide you, but you have to make the decision. And that's what God does for us. He guides us, but he lets us make the decision. And when Brian applied to college and he got in, one of the things that he was looking at doing is he thought he wanted to play baseball in college. He thought it would be fun, which I'm sure it is. And he came home and he told us one day, he's just like, hey, I just got a scholarship from UNO for baseball. I'm like, cool, awesome. I get to watch you play. It's not as far as you. But when you get the chance to go play, go watch your kid do something that they love to do, it's just wonderful. And so I was really excited. And he got thinking about it. It was for the college that he's going to, you know, it's a decent sized scholarship. He got offered $3,000 a year to play baseball. Well, as you guys know, he turned it down. He's just like, I just don't know if I want to commit to that. He goes, I know I have to get a job because I know I'm going to need money. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it's not. But he didn't want to be stressed out. He didn't want the extra stress. And they also have they also have what they call clubs. And these clubs are for racing. And they are considered a sport, just as much as baseball. They have baseball, soccer, basketball. They have volleyball there too? Okay, and volleyball at They have a lot of sports for a fairly small college. And what really impressed me too was the scholarship he got. They never came and watched him play. They actually didn't see him on the field. They don't know his attitude on the field. And they told him, they were like, they're going by talking to his coach and looking at his stats. And they offered him $3,000. That's pretty good, at least in my eyes, especially if they didn't come out and like, oh yes, we want him on our team. But going back to the racing clubs, they're just as intense. And you can get some scholarships from them, but for the racing teams, you have to interview for them. You have to apply, and you have to they have to say, yes, we want you on our team. So now he has to decide which one he wants to be on, because he's just like, I think I'd rather do that. And I'm looking at him, I go, you know what? That might be a better idea than playing baseball. Because are you going to play baseball after college? He's like, no. He goes, I'll have fun. He goes, but it's college baseball, so it's going to be more work. And I go, yeah, I get that. You're an adult now. Guess what? You're in the working world. And he goes, it'd be better for me to get on a racing team, because then I will know if I really want to do that or not. I go, that's probably a smart idea. So he turned down the baseball scholarship. And I have to admit, I was about this much disappointed, because that meant I don't get to watch him play anymore. Brian you guys all know Brian, he's a blast. There's very few times where he is actually down and mopey. If you've ever seen him on the field, he is a hoot to watch. He is one of the loudest people out there. Go figure. But he's like that in, I think, just about everything he does, because he puts his whole heart into it. But to be 18 years old and to make a decision like that, I don't know how nervous he was, but I'll tell you one thing, I was nervous for him, because that's a big decision. Because when you're in college and you get $3,000, that's a lot of money. that would have paid for at least 3 of his classes a year, or I have to do some quick math, probably about 4 or 5 months of dorm fees. That's pretty good. And to tell them no, you're looking at paying for all your classes or all of your dorm fees. But I think he made the right choice. I really believe he followed what God was telling him to do, and he made the right decision. Kind of like cutting that baby in half. If you guys know Brian, playing baseball was his baby. That was one of his passions. He absolutely loved it. And to decide to give that up, like the one mom did, she would rather see that child live than to be killed. That's what he did. And I can also see him sitting in the king's spot, making that decision. Which one is going to be best for me? Which one does God want me to do? That's a hard decision at 18 years old. It's a hard decision for us trying to decide if we want to buy Brian a house. Especially since, coming back to the verse, we're letting one of our dreams, well, not die, I wouldn't say, being put on hold. Because one of the reasons we are even looking at houses is because, I know we're not old yet, but Matt and we're starting to look at retirement homes. Where do we want to go when we retire? Do we really want to take care of 7.5 acres for the rest of our lives? I'm like, no. I was taking care of some trees last weekend and had one land on my hand. That was fun. Luckily, Kevin was right next to me, and I shut the saw off and said, help, and he was right there. But do I want to be doing that for the rest of my life? No. I don't think so. So we were thinking about downsizing, thinking about seeing where the market was, seeing if we can go ahead and afford one. You know, we can use it as a vacation home right now. You know, that would be great. But then Brian came and he said, hey, a couple of us are looking at a place to rent instead of staying in the dorms. And we're like, what if we got the house for them? Those all still have to pay rent, but at least, I guess it comes to that, since we would be the landlords, at least we know that they're not going to get gypped, I guess, in some ways. So I guess we're trying to look out for them. Not just Brian. He's got some good friends that he's making. But doing that, buying a house for him, means we got to put our dream on hold. And that's okay. Matt and I, are okay with that. We've already came to terms with it. We can put off a retirement home. We still have time. I mean, Brian still has time too, but we like to help him out when we can. It's kind of like here at the church. We need to figure out what we want to do. How are we going to do it? How are we going to handle it? How are we going to take care of it? I don't know about you guys, but I know one of the toughest questions on what to do in my house is, what are we going to have for supper? Because there's 4 of us, and we all look at each other and we all say, I have no idea what sounds good. So why is it one of the most simplest things we have no idea what to do with? But when you want to buy a house, or you want to buy a car, or you want to go on vacation, you pretty much know what you have to do. Because you all know we have to save, because you have to have money for it, or find a way to finance it. But why is it sometimes the simplest things is, what do we do next? The hardest decision. I think that's something that we need to think about. And I know Pastor Brandon does a really good job of finding stuff for us to do and giving us stuff to do. But it's not just Pastor Brandon's job to do that. It's also our job. So if you feel this little nudge saying, I think we need to do this, you need to bring it up. Now, I'm going to be totally honest with you. There's no guarantee it's going to work. Just like there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to buy a house. But you never know unless you try. We've tried things and it's worked out wonderfully. We've tried things that went on for years, and then we finally noticed that, okay, it's time to stop because we have ran its course. It has done what it needs to do. Sometimes making that decision on what to do may not last forever. This house we're going to hopefully buy, we're only looking at having it for maybe 4 or 5 years. It's not our house we're going to keep. No offense to Lima, Ohio, but it's not a place where I want to retire. It's not a bad town. It's a decent town. But we're going to use it for a purpose. And that's okay that it doesn't last for hundreds of years. It's not supposed to be a tradition. We're supposed to think of the what can we do and do those things until it's time to move on to something else. And honestly, I don't know what it is yet, but it's time for us as a church to move on for something else. We just have to figure out what it is. So I'm going to leave you with that and let you think about that. And if you have any ideas, even if you think it is stupid, even if you think it may fail, you need to bring it to Pastor Brandon. Because we can't do it unless you say something. And that decision of what to do is going to be a whole lot easier than figuring out what you're going to do for dinner. Because I can tell you right now, I know that's one of the questions I'm going to get this afternoon, and I'm going to say, I have no idea. What sounds good? I know one response that I will get, because it's kind of a normal one. He's going to look at me and say, let's just do pizza. You can only eat pizza so many days a week. Preferably not 7 days a week. But I'm going to leave it there. I shared some stuff that was going on in our lives. I'll keep you updated. Right now, there's nothing major going on. We're still in the beginning steps. But I do ask that you pray. Because in prayer, you get answers. And the more people that pray, the better it is. You can never have too many people praying for you. So let me repeat that again. If you have any ideas on what we need to do, please bring it up. because we will find a way to do it, and we will find a way to make it work. And if we don't, that doesn't mean it's a bad idea, doesn't mean that we're not supposed to do it. It just means that the timing might not be right. But please think about it and figure out what we're going to do. If you would like to rise,